Hello, the child-centred learning is a way to stimulate and motivate young learners and teenagers to learn English for themselves. Let's have a look at what I think was my most successful young learner lesson ever. The class was about 7 years old and we had great rapport. I'd already gotten to know these kids and I'd applied the music model of motivation to inspire them. You can learn more about the music model on another video on this website. Now, these were great kids, and the target language was this: describing objects using the 5 senses. So it looks like a ball, it feels soft, it smells sweet. I asked each student to wear a blindfold and reach into a bag full of objects which I'd found around the school. And just using touch, they described the object in the bag. Then the student pulled the object out of the bag and the class described it. I didn't teach this grammar structure, instead I guided the blindfolded student towards the correct grammar. And to do this, I used prompts and recast the student's mistakes correctly. This would be a typical exchange. Now, the class listened to the correct grammatical patterns spoken by the blindfolded student, and they adapted those patterns to describe the object they were looking at. Next, I took the kids outside to get some samples from nature, flowers, interesting stones and so on. They naturally interacted with each other in English, and they loved the sunshine. They developed their social skills through the English they were using. They returned to the class and they made a poster from all the samples they'd found in the garden, practicing describing as they went along. And finally they gave a mini presentation of what they'd found. The grammar of "it looks, it smells, it feels like" was just a natural part of the kids' interaction. But I didn't really teach them anything. All I did was watch over them and answer their questions. I didn't directly correct any errors. For a lot of the class, I didn't even need to be there. So why was this so successful? What did the kids learn? Why did they learn so deeply? Well, this is what I think. Inside every child is a curiosity to learn, and a joy of discovery, and a wonder at noticing new things and figuring them out. It's just part of our human nature. But so many teachers squash all of this golden stuff with the lesson plans and the worksheets and the methodologies. Often children learn despite the teacher, not because of the teacher. And maybe if we just got out of the way and handed more control to our students, they'd figure it out for themselves. Let's look at 2 approaches. Meet my daughter, isn't she beautiful? She's learning to read at the moment. She loves her stories, and like all kids, she wants to do it for herself. Now imagine I find a reading app and I draw my daughter's attention to the app, and I download it to my phone and I read the instructions carefully. Then I tell my kid how to play and we play together and I correct all her mistakes. Oh, she has a good time, because any time with her awesome daddy is golden time. But I go to work and she stops playing and starts watching TV. Is this familiar to parents? Well, of course it is. But how about a different approach? My kid finds an app, maybe recommended by her friend at school. She wants the app. She needs the app. So she decides to persuade her dad to buy the app for her. She manipulates me like any good 8-year-old manipulates her dad, and I get her to tidy her room, but she gets the app on her own tablet. She plays, she makes mistakes, she learns for herself how to correct her mistakes. And I'm around, I can answer her questions, but I'm not hovering over her. Finally, she succeeds each level of the game. She notices how she succeeded. She remembers the strategies she used to win. She figures out the patterns and the principles of the software, and she links these patterns to her past learning. Then she takes the patterns and the principles and the strategies which she's discovered for herself, and she applies these to her next challenge, her future learning. Which approach is best? I help or she discovers? What's the difference? Now notice the left-hand column. I find, I show, I read, I play. And the right-hand column? She wants, she wants, she decides, she gets, she succeeds. I've gotten out of the way of her learning. All I am is the enabler, and I'm there to give advice, but only if she wants it. If all our lesson plans follow this cycle, I believe we'd have classes full of happier, more motivated, curious learners. Let's look how this applies to my daughter. She noticed that reading app for herself. The impetus came from her. It was her desire that drove the process. Now, there was enough challenge to keep her interested. She developed her own strategies to meet those challenges. Her play included making mistakes and learning from them. The point of an experiment is that it might not work at first, so kids have to learn why. They learn much more by making their own mistakes and finding their own solutions. If they want our help, they can always ask. But instead of feeding her the answers to her problems, I encouraged her to think things through herself. Now, it's vital that my daughter succeeded. The app was just above her level. The challenge is important, but the success is what motivated her to take the next step. My daughter used her own critical thinking skills to analyse how the app worked and to discover the underlying principles and patterns of the tasks. To use her previous knowledge to figure out how these principles and patterns work, and then to use them for herself to progress. She wasn't taught, instead she noticed for herself how things worked out. Instead of teaching patterns of words and patterns of grammar, we should give children engaging activities where they notice for themselves these patterns. Use the environment around as a source for authentic texts and experiences, and kids will notice how English is used naturally and authentically. All you need to do is support them. The activity must be driven by the children's enjoyment. It's got to be fun. If they're enjoying the task, then they become curious about the next step. I mean, kids love a challenge. Don't teach the kids facts. Instead, teach them strategies to help them discover things for themselves. Don't help them to memorize rules. Instead, allow them to figure out the rules for themselves. Hey, mistakes are not a bad thing. Mistakes are absolutely essential. Help students find their own mistakes for themselves. Let them experiment with language themselves and just guide them. Let the students use language in a personal way. This may not result in them reproducing exactly the same English as what you have written on your lesson plan. But so what? Go with it. If children succeed, their inner motivation grows, and then they become more motivated. And with more motivation, they achieve more success. And so you notice this snowballing effect as children's learning gains more and more momentum. This is a well-known paradigm called the resultative hypothesis. Success equals motivation equals more success equals more motivation, and that's how it goes. And finally, the children figure it out for themselves. They have a model in their head of how English and how communication and how the whole world works. Any new information is uploaded and linked and processed into their own mental model, which is personal to each child. Don't tell them how to process new information, let them puzzle it out for themselves. That's your key word for this video. Make a note of it and remember it. Pineapple. Hey, sometimes it's difficult to give up control. We want to do our best by giving our students all the facts they need, but we're not the guardians of all knowledge. It's much more effective to allow our students space to notice new words and new ways to communicate for themselves. Students look up to you. If you tell them what to do in detail, they'll do it. But you're the one doing the thinking. Instead, if we present the task and we allow the students to work out their own rules and principles and outcomes for themselves, they're not only learning English, but problem solving, analysis, evaluation, and creativity. Show students that they can succeed, and they'll want to show you that they can do it better. But don't jump in and show students exactly what to do. Instead, ask them, how will you solve this problem? Show me how you can find the answer yourself. Encourage mistakes. Give as much praise for mistakes as you do for correct answers. That sounds counterintuitive. Ask students, do you know a better way to say that? Do you see why there's a better way? The worst thing you can do is provide a challenge which is too difficult. If students cannot succeed, just drop your lesson plan. Start with something more simplified and then build up to what you want to achieve, or just try something different. Allow students time to process new information in a way which is personal to them. If they don't learn exactly what you taught, maybe they learn something more valuable and personal to them. Hey, next time you plan a lesson for your young learners, structure your lesson plan around the child-centred learning cycle. Let's put the student at the centre of the class. Okay, thanks for listening. I hope that was helpful.